good afternoon, everybody. It's 12 o'clock, so we'll go ahead and get started here. Welcome to our webinar where we're going to explore leadership in turbulent times. My name is Tyler Ritter, and I am one of the enrollment and success coordinators here at UT Austin's Center for Professional Education. I'll kick off today's webinar and then turn it over to our speakers. But before I introduce our speakers, I just wanted to discuss who we are. The Center for Professional Education, which we shorten to CPA, is the department with UT's extended campus that offers career training and professional development programs for professionals in a wide variety of industries and their organizations. If this is your first time attending one of our webinars, welcome. We're glad that you were able to join us. And now a little background on our speakers. Amira Pollock is a leadership coach and educator known for creating engaging, interactive learning experiences at UT Austin. She teaches leadership and communications courses for CPE and the Macomb School of Business, among other departments. And back before the pandemic, Amira had been a regular presenter at South by Southwest, selected to speak at the conference for 4 consecutive years. Amira is going to facilitate each of the 3 webinars discussions that we have planned for the webinar series. Today, Amira will be speaking with Emil Kresl. Emil is the founding director of UT Austin's Learning and Development Department, where he advocates for continuous learning for all working professionals. Emil's personal and professional mission is to teach people how to love learning, work smarter, and enjoy working harder. Today, Amira and Emil will explore leadership in challenging times. Specifically, they are going to discuss lessons learned while working through this year's challenges and how to turn them into positive outcomes for our organizations, our teams, and ourselves. There will be time for you to submit questions and comments later. And with that, I'll hand it over to Amira and Emil.
Thank you, Tyler, and thank you everyone for joining us today. Let's dive in. I'll get us started with the first question. What are your thoughts on professional development in turbulent times?
So this is obviously a big subject for us right now, and really a big subject for anybody who's doing sort of proactive or promotional programming for any kind of institution or organization. It's difficult because right now managers and leaders, their focus right now, justifiably, is making sure that they have the funding to pay people their worth, trying to avoid furloughs and layoffs, making sure that people are staying healthy, and making sure people staying alive. Like, that's the focus. That's a very difficult thing to try and sort of compete with, and we shouldn't be competing with it, because those are obviously things that we should be really focusing on. They're important, but there is a tendency in these sort of states of crises to overmanage and underlead. Right, it's a trap that leaders can get into, where it's just constantly, how do we keep the ship from sinking? And that is not an environment that anybody wants to be in, where it's just constantly about mitigation and avoidance. It's not a healthy environment, and eventually people will very quickly start to burn out. Certainly your top performers will not stay in that kind of environment. So it's very important to still be strategic, to still be a visionary, still be looking to the future. And that's why learning and development is so essential, because it keeps people thinking, it keeps people learning and thinking about the future and what we can do better and more. But again, it's difficult to get people's attention and say we have to do more than just stay afloat, right? We have to do things better, and we have to also be sympathetic to the difficulties that managers and leaders are facing, but we also have to really make sure that we encourage them to keep moving forward.
And so, speaking of a subtopic to help us with that momentum, let's look at self-leadership. First of all, what is self-leadership? And how does that impact our workplace performance?
So when I talk about self-leadership, I really mean that it is people taking charge of their own future, their own careers, their own learning. When I first started getting involved with learning or instruction, there was and there still is a kind of obsession with leadership. There's so much attention and funding and resources going to leadership development. Like any kind of curriculum that was built, it was always around this concept of leadership. And that was troubling to me because that left out, so it's very elitist, right, and exclusionary, and it doesn't allow people to really take advantage of those learning opportunities. And not only that, but generally speaking, those that kind of curriculum is very expensive and sort of lofty. People doing things, like ropes courses and ridiculous, things like that for leadership. And because all that money and the resources were going towards that elite group, there's nothing left for the people who were doing a lot of the work. So a big portion of people were left out. And so that's where this notion of self-leadership came about, and showing people that, we have to, in some respects, take charge of our own learning and our own development, and making leadership also accessible, so that when we say leadership, make sure that it's not exclusionary, make sure that it doesn't necessarily mean that you have to have people reporting to you. Leadership in a broad sense, and we have to make sure that people feel welcome to and have a sense of belonging when they come into any kind of learning environment.
And that seems like that would be really pertinent now, since we can't do a virtual ropes course. That would end badly, and we really need to have that self-advocacy and being able to steer ourselves.
Right.
But with this challenging time, how can leaders help their people commit to learning and growth in light of all the other challenges going on?
Yeah, so let me start with a couple of things here. One, it's important for people to understand that there's a distinction between training and professional development. And I want to start with that explanation because sometimes, I don't know if I can say often, but I feel like it happens a lot, where managers and leaders will say, yeah, I all of my direct reports or my team were all about professional development. But when we kind of look into it, what's really happening is training. And training is essential. You have to do it. It's important. I do not mean to minimize it, but training allows people to do the jobs that they were hired to do, right? And that's, again, it's a given. Like, clearly people are going to have to learn how to do the jobs that they were going to do. But professional development, where a lot of our programming comes from, is a sort of higher order of learning and thinking. And that is extremely important. Obviously, you have to do training, but we're saying it has to have continuous learning. You always have to be learning. You always have to encourage that for your people. So I want to make that distinction first. And answer your question, how do leaders create that space? The other thing that is sort of useful to understand is this kind of spectrum that learning and development exists on, where it's sort of a perception spectrum. On one end of the spectrum, we have leaders and managers who are just skeptics or cynics. Like they are simply against learning and development. They think that it's a waste of time. Like, just be at your desk, be in the field, do what you were hired to do, and we'll all be fine. The middle of the spectrum, where it's where most people, I think, at least at UT, exist, is I believe in learning development. I believe in professional development. Absolutely, let's do it. I encourage you to do it, but we just don't have time, or we just don't have the money. Mostly it's we don't have the time. There's no time to do that. And where we want to be is somewhere on the other end of the spectrum, get those people in the middle and say, it's not about, just making excuses. You need to be in a place where you are requiring it of all people, not just encouraging it, but when you meet with them on a regular basis saying, what are you doing to learn and grow? And helping create that structure of learning for your organization. That's where we want to be. We don't want to hear anymore where managers say, we just don't have the time for it. That you need to build that in to your organizational structure and your positions so that everybody has time to learn, always, even in states of crisis. And I would say, especially in states of crisis. You have to make that happen. So create the capacity, create the space, and that, granted, may happen over a longer period of time, but at least start moving in that direction where you're providing people with the capacity and space to learn.
So let's say I'm sold. Okay, I'm gonna commit to doing that. How can leaders be helped to foster learning opportunities now with the strapped budgets, with the challenges of childcare and limited time and resources? So let's say I'm like, okay, I want to do this for my team. I'm committed. Yes, I need to foster learning activities, but how do I create that now?
Okay. So there's a couple different things. One is the cost thing. So I'll start with learning events, learning opportunities do not have to be expensive. Some of them are, but not all. I mean, even, CPE, they offer a 10% discount to all staff. We have LinkedIn Learning. L&D provides LinkedIn Learning for all of staff and students and faculty at the University of Texas. Thousands and thousands of courses available at no cost to that entire population. So that provides for micro learning, provides for exploratory learning, it provides for some in-depth learning. And the topics, I mean, they have hundreds of new courses every month. So there's an incredible opportunity already. We offer, L&D, we offer, free webinars, free panel discussions. Our YouTube site has lots of videos where people can just explore and watch as they have time. And some of it's micro learning, again, some of it's more in depth. The other thing that people can do are, even without having that, they can have reading groups, get together every month or every couple of months and read the same book, have a discussion around it. We have, L&D, we have a UT Reads campaign. Our last campaign, our first campaign was everybody on campus. We encouraged them to read The Sword and the Shield by Dr. Peniel Joseph. It's a dual biography of Martin Luther King Jr. and Malcolm X. We had smaller reading groups all around campus, reading that group and discussing it in a meaningful and brave way. And we have another one coming up. And so that's in an organized way. It's free. We give away, dozens of books around campus, and otherwise it's just the cost of the book. And you can do that on your own. And other things you can do are have somebody share what they learned from an article or book that they're reading at an all staff meeting. There's tons of ways that are either low or no cost to the individual and to the organization. Mm-hmm. Now, I will say, in terms of time, yes, sometimes that's going to be tricky. And sometimes it will just be, I don't have time for it this week, but it cannot be the default. It has to be a longer term structural change that you have to make in your organization to say, how do we find the capacity to make this happen? And I'm not saying it's easy, but if you want to have engaged employees, if you want to have good retention for your top performers and your high potentials, you've got to create that environment, because they are not coming to UT for the outrageous salaries. Right? I mean, you have to have something else that woos them in. You have to have something else that keeps them here. And so to do that, you need an enriching, invigorating cultural experience for them. And if you want to have really high performers, that's the way to do it, learning and development.
So what does that look like now for the foreseeable future to have a culture of continuous learning within this limited virtual interaction?
The virtual environment is not a limitation for learning and development. Yes, it will be nice at some point to provide the option for live in-person events where we can do certain things and there's more humanity involved. But in a lot of ways, what has happened is it's pushed learning development faster in the direction we should have been going already, right? I mean, this has broken down a lot of barriers. We don't have to find a room on UT campus or a hotel, conference room somewhere. We can do this, and we can do it with a lot of people or a few people. There are a lot of benefits to the virtual environment. So I would say if an organization or leader is lamenting the fact that we are in a virtual environment and it's hard to do learning events, it's just not an excuse. I mean, in a lot of ways, there are more benefits to the virtual environment for learning opportunities and events.
And I have a story to tell from when I was teaching a class about a month ago. I had lots of interactions. And so I was asking participants to keep their videos on as they were able to. I got a private message from chat, which is another technology feature that's really helped people.
Right.
From a mom saying that she had her baby with her. And so that's why she wasn't able to do it. And so I wrote her back. I said, great, you've got your baby. Yeah. We might have a dog or a cat in the background, like bring it all. And just the ground rules are you can always mute, you can always turn the video off. And this is a population for lots of different groups that maybe they couldn't fly into Austin or wherever a training was. Or maybe they had a young baby with them, even sleeping most of the time, but felt like they couldn't come in. So it's been really wonderful to see that, like you're saying, not a limitation, but just something different and something that is in some ways more inclusive. So I hope that we do keep that momentum going and have those inclusive opportunities even beyond. But
yeah, we were just talking about it in our portfolios leadership meeting and how that has really helped bring humanity to that space and shown a different dimension to people's lives that we never would have seen before. And it's enjoyable. It's a really nice thing. So yeah, there are some good things that have come out of it.
Yeah, and thinking of vulnerability and Brene Brown's work, who's a visiting professor at UT now as well, that we have to be vulnerable and connect so that we can come together even when we are apart is so important.
Right.
But then going back to, okay, so we're in a virtual landscape, we need to still be learning. How do we help people adapt to our still trying to get a handle of all of the virtual and all of the technology and glitches that can come up too? Yeah.
I mean, part of me feels like if you're still experiencing, like on an organizational level, if you're still experiencing those frustrations, maybe something else is going on there. That's not to say that there aren't setbacks and challenges, but the short answer is like ask, like what's going on? Is it the technology? Is there something else, or is it really it's a distraction? It's that you've got the kid who is supposed to be in class and she is not right now, and like that obviously is an absolutely justifiable frustration to have. So I would try and find what is the setback. Is it the distractions? Because that's kind of another deal, that it's not really the virtual environment. It's the fact that something you alluded to earlier, we're trying to do all the components of our lives in the same space and time. And that's a different thing. Like that's something that we all are, most of us are struggling with, in some more than others.
Well, the do-it-all mentality has really come into a big obstacle now.
Right. And there are some things that are a little too simplistic, but I still should say it because it might help somebody, where, for school, for example, my daughter has a 5-minute break, just even in the class. And we need to start thinking about that in terms for the work environment, so that the meetings don't go up to the half hour or up to the solid hour. They end 5 minutes early, that allow people to just decompress a little bit, because it used to be that even if you had wall-to-wall meetings, you were walking through the building, you were walking across campus, and that created some sort of buffer. And so now just the back-to-back meetings, that can be draining. And some organizations might have it in their control to say, let's stop our meetings 5 minutes early so that we can at least have a buffer in between meetings. So there's simple things you can do like that. But other thing in terms of individuals, give people space, give people some sympathy when you see that they're struggling and they just are not having the time. Talk to them and provide them with resources that UT has available, EAP, that I need to talk to a counselor. So, all those things are vitally important. It's a difficult time in terms of that hugely compressed, do it all at once environment that we're all in.
And that leads right into the next question that I have, which is, what advice do you have to help staff grow rather than burn out, especially now?
Yeah. So the whole, I might be jumping the gun a little bit here, but I want to get this in here. Learning and development is the load-bearing pillar for wellness. Like, you have to, if you believe in wellness and you believe, you understand what anxiety means, and you understand what stress and all the things are, then you have to know that learning and development is a vital component to holistic wellness. As a leader, you have to make sure that you're including that. So you can't purport to say, yes, we have a good wellness package, and you don't have anything to do with learning and development, because people need to learn and they need to grow. So as an individual, we have to understand that as well. You have to take care of yourself if you're doing, fitness regimen, or you're doing yoga or your meditation. Those are great things, especially as you're learning them, right? Because it's a new thing and you're learning about meditation or mindfulness. But you have to continue to learn, because as human beings, that's what keeps us vital and keeps us vibrant and engaged in what we're doing. That's why I say earlier, for leaders and managers, if you need to have some sort of justification for treating people well, this is it. Like, they are going to be higher performers. They're going to be more productive. They're going to be more engaged in the work if they're learning, because their synapses are firing. They're engaged with what they do. They're learning. They're trying to apply what they learn to their work and their general environment. They're sharing what they learn, and people get passionate. They really get excited about what they're doing. When people stop learning, when they are just focusing on bailing the water or putting out the fires, that is exhausting. And it becomes unsustainable, because people just can't go into work day in and day out where it's just about austerity, where it's just about how are we going to make more cuts? How are we going to do more with less? And you cannot have a thriving, innovative place if that's your constant and your default. You have to get people moving and growing and thinking.
That's what the challenges have all highlighted for me. Is it makes me think of the Friends quote, if anyone's Friends fans, of them trying to move the couch the same way up the tiny stairs and getting stuck, and they're like, pivot.
Right.
And so here we are in the virtual environment. We can't just keep going the same way.
Yeah.
Or even before that, if we're not learning, we're just continuing to head towards the wrong goals. And so it's
Right.
even more important now, right? Like, to be innovating and continuously learning and pivoting, being able
Right.
to have vulnerability to take risks and change and improve.
Right. And listen, like, that's the thing about pivoting and making the change, but people aren't going to know what to pivot to, right? You might have managers or leaders who are saying, why did you pivot? Why aren't you more agile? Why aren't you making a change? But they have to know that there's another option out there. They have to understand that there's something new that they can do, right? You have to be able to, the people who are doing the work need to be the people who are actually driving the change. It can't just be a top-down thing. The same thing with learning. Like, you have to make sure that people are really thinking about, oh, I can pivot because here's another option out here. But if they don't know the options, then they're not going to pivot. UT, we say what happens here changes the world. And I believe in that strongly, but you can't be an organization any organization that is constantly trying to promote and talk about innovation, we need to innovate, we need to change, if you don't have learning and development. You have to have learning and development if you're going to have any kind of continuous improvement or innovation. You will never have innovation if you don't have learning and development.
And it sounds like that's also a mindset change too. So as leaders, if we can be more transparent, then we can also show others, like, here's a story where mistakes were made. And especially now with technology glitches and things changing, there's going to be mistakes. Let's focus on the learning that's needed. Let's focus on the solutions and not the problems. So we can share things that were made as mistakes and laugh about it and have more grace. Like, we all see someone talking muted, or they can't get on, or all these things. I know with my daughter, if someone has trouble getting on, instead of fussing or saying, oh, well, the teacher has a lot of empathy and talks about, I'm so sorry that happened. I'm glad you're back. And 2 weeks from now, we're going to have a session on emotional intelligence and talk about that in these tumultuous times too. But I want to make sure also we're going to do some questions, but I'd love to hear your thoughts on, for everyone listening now, how can we have a call to action for ourselves, for self-leadership? Like, what happens next? What are your recommendations for next steps now?
So compassion is a big part of it. And I'll start with the leaders first in terms of call to action. We have a long history of confusing people who are really comfortable with exploitation as being good leaders. Like, that needs to stop. Like, I won't name names, but there are plenty. If you go to Entrepreneur Magazine or Inc.com or Harvard Business Review, the same like 6 white dudes all the time exemplified as the best leaders. And really, they're just really good at exploiting situations and people. And that has to end, and we have to be more sympathetic and empathetic to people that we work with. And that starts with creating an environment that allows people to grow. Fundamental to being an excellent leader, both, in terms of effective leader and moral leader, is making sure you are developing other people. And that doesn't mean you have to be in a leadership, like a formal leadership, position. You can do that with anybody. So encouraging people, like, oh, it seems like you're really interested in that. Maybe you should take this class, or maybe you should read this book, or tell me more. Just helping them, start a conversation with that. That really helps people. And so people in leadership positions and management positions, that's what I encourage you to do. Start really not just encouraging, but requiring people. Like, I need you to be learning because I need you to be engaged, and you should be passionate about coming to work. And to do that, you get them learning. And L&D is here to help you do that. You don't have to do it on your own. Like, that's what we're here for. But you really need to start the ball rolling in that way. And then they'll be more comfortable. Now, on an individual contributor level, what I call it action is go out and learn. Like, be explorative learners. There's so many ways to do it, and L&D is all about that. Providing LinkedIn Learning and all our videos on YouTube and all the channels that we promote through our YouTube channel. There's tons of way to explore. UT Libraries in itself is a great way to explore your learning. Go out there, be curious, because that's a great way to learn.
Thank you. Those of you that have questions, you are in luck. We are going to be taking questions now, and you can just type them right into the chat box.
It doesn't look like the Q&A is up. So yeah, just to make sure, if you are asking questions, make sure it's coming to all panelists.
All right, we do have a question. What if your interest in learning and growing have nothing to do with your work?
Great question. So I have a strong opinion on this matter. it's really something that's fairly common is a manager, like somebody will come to a manager and say, I really want to take this course. And the manager, I say, okay, well, how does it directly apply to your work? And my feeling is if you can make that direct connection of how it will directly apply to your work, it's really probably more like training. The whole point, like a justifiable response to that could be, I don't know yet. Like, I don't know. That's what exploratory learning is. Like, we should go out and we should be able to, take a course in Italian if you're a custodial person, and just that learning process of thinking with a different part of your brain, if you're not Italian, thinking with a different part of your brain and learning a new language really helps you be a more critical thinker and a better problem solver. So it's not that, okay, I'm going to apply my Italian language to a customer or a customer base who speak Italian. It's the act of learning in and of itself that's helpful and that we should promote. And having people, try and justify how their learning directly applies to their current work that they do, that's not how it works. Like, it might apply, and that's because if you want to be innovative and think in a different way about how to solve a problem, you don't know yet, because all those solutions out there ready, trying to be applied in a way that nobody has thought of yet. And that's why you need to be curious and explore. So I feel very strongly, as you might be able to tell, that you shouldn't have to justify how something is going to directly apply to your current role and how you do your work.
All right, so we've got a few more questions coming in, and I'll just go through each of them and let you guys respond. The next one was, as a leader, I also have kids at home while 100% teleworking. How do we also balance those responsibilities, specifically the issue with staff?
Yeah. I mean, normalize it, right? So the fact that, you have kids run around in back of you, obviously that should not be, nobody should be rolling their eyes at that sort of thing. Or if suddenly somebody has to dart out of the room frantically, the response shouldn't be, hey, where'd you go? Like, what are you doing? It should be, is your kid okay? Like that, those walls are broken down. Like we should be well over that by now. And so people who are suddenly going to have to cancel a meeting or step out of a meeting early, normalize it. And leaders in particular and managers, you are the people who are going to have to normalize it. And some of that can be prefaced in saying, look, we're all in different environments right now, and we need to be okay with people who are going to have alternative schedules. The same thing with the schedules in general. If somebody has to, put in hours not between the hours of 8 and 5, we need to be flexible in that way as well.
That also makes me think about the importance of simplifying. Like, things get so complicated, we really need to simplify here. And also, as someone who teaches classes and does live webinars with the kid downstairs, yeah. I also look at, we're really resilient and our kids are really resilient too. But there's tons of research and education that we have to believe in them. So really let them see that you believe that they can be more independent and they can also rise to this challenge, so that they have that momentum and that can-do attitude of learning new things too, and continuous learning and continuous improvement. And then when mistakes are made, also like model Frozen, model Elsa, let it go, move on, help support your team by letting things go and not being not understanding of seeing kids pop in meetings. And again, like you said, normalize it.
So just a little, I know we're out of time. I just have to make a little confession here. Earlier on, for any time that I'm doing something like this, I have to hardwire into my Ethernet. And so I have to use a cable that goes like through my entire house to the Ethernet, so I don't have a better signal. And right as we started, my 4-year-old was like starting to like pull the Ethernet cord out of my computer from like, somewhere down, and I was like, oh my God, I'm going to lose the internet connection. So yeah, I mean, things happen and we all have to say that we are okay with that.
All right, so we do have a few more questions, and I just want to be respectful of everybody's time. So I'm just going to select a couple of the questions that popped out here. So what if you create and promote this type of environment as a leader, but others such as staff, other employees might not want to?
Yeah, that's a little bit more rare, but in terms of the other way around, but it certainly happens. And a lot of times it's more with the long-term employees, because people who have been in the institution for a long time, because they're so used to a different culture. For like millennials and younger generations coming into the workforce, it's expected. Like they are looking for learning opportunities. But anyways, to answer your question, it is about a culture shift. So like any other, it's about change management, proper change management. And you want to do, it's a constant drumbeat. So you can't just say, go out and learn. You have to have a conversation about it. So help them with career development. And L&D can help as well. There are certain things you can do to help get people focused on what they want to learn, like their 360 assessments that L&D also does, that sort of help point them in a direction of where their general interests are. But other thing is just exploration, and make it a regular pattern. And I mentioned before, like you just might have a regular sharing session at all staff, to have somebody like share something new that you learned about whatever, like this month or this week, and you sort of have that on rotation, so that people are always thinking about this idea of learning. But it might take some time for people who are sort of entrenched in a different kind of culture.
All right, so I'll pick a couple more questions out from the list that came in. What is the best way to foster L&D and online learning?
So I think it's similar to the question that we were just talking about. I think you have to really embed it in your culture. You really need to, it needs to be a constant drumbeat. So during like even like your one-on-ones, you don't necessarily have to ask like every week, but more than once a year, like ask, like, what are you learning? Like what development are you going through right now? And if they're not sure, talk to them about it. You know, what are your interests? The other thing you can do as a group, like for an all staff, you know, bring in a guest speaker that talks about something interesting. I mean, there are a lot of people at UT who you could have spend in a lifetime of your career, you know, just exploring the knowledge that is at UT. Have somebody come in and give a half hour, an hour talk about what they know about, and that starts to embed this idea of learning, and how learning is not necessarily always fun, because really powerful learning is often kind of painful and uncomfortable, but at least shows how that curiosity is something that is part of the culture, and you just constantly want to embed that process into your team and your culture.
All right, thank you. Next question is, do you have a recommended amount of hours of learning that you feel is the most beneficial for employees, whether it be hours per week, several hours a month, etc.? What do you find the most beneficial?
Yeah, I don't have you know, a formula for that, and I would hesitate to even give a window, because obviously it's going to be different for different people. You know, Google, I think, does it's something like 4 hours per week, or maybe it's one full day. I don't know, but you know, it's built into the process. And you know, it might just be that you have some sort of expectation that at least 1 hour every week is dedicated to learning and development. That's not to say that they can't go over that. The other thing is that it's learning, of course, is more fluid, right? So for example, with and at UT, and especially sort of government institutions, we want to build in a bureaucracy around it. And well, do they only have to do in a reading group? Do they only have to read like during their work hours, or can they read during their work hours? And I think we need to start being okay with some fluidity in terms of learning. If you're doing a reading group, maybe they read for an hour, out of the week, but maybe they're also taking it home and reading it, but they're not counting it on their timesheet. So I'm part of HR, so I understand the importance of kind of rules and policies around this sort of thing. But learning should happen, all the time in our personal lives and our professional life. And so trying to limit it to, a certain number of hours per week or month, I would just sort of hesitate to do that.
All right, just a couple more questions as we wrap up. When confronted with staff requests for leadership training or consulting, many managers find excuses to avoid this. Is there a way to change their mind, or do we accept that this is how the leader works?
Yeah, so great question, and totally happens all the time. And, let me start macro. Part of this, call to action thing, the way that we're going to change, oddly enough, UT, we're a great institution of learning, right? We do great research, and we, matriculate some great scholars. But because we're so focused on the students and researchers, as we should be, we sometimes forget that the staff and the faculty also need to always be learning. The continuous learning is essential to that environment. Like in the corporate world, that it's kind of a norm. Like there's kind of always an L&D program in corporations and even startups. But we have kind of lost our way in that way. And we have to change that culture. And the way to do that is on two fronts. One, start from the top and get leadership, like the C-suite and the VP suite, to really start promoting it. And that, again, that's going to be very hard to do right now because they're trying to keep people alive right now. But we still have to say we need to be thinking about learning and growing and improving and innovation, and having them really showing the benefits of that. The other front is the groundswell, like creating grassroots and having people constantly requesting it and going to their managers, their AVPs, their deans, their chairs, and saying, we really need more learning opportunities, really need more time for learning opportunities. Can we create some sort of program or committee that, and just constantly asking. And that's how, when those two fronts come together, we're going to actually start to see a change in the tide. But it's an uphill battle right now because we've never had a learning and development program. This is the first time we've ever had this at UNT. So, our first year we made some strides, but there's still a lot of work to do, but it's going to require all of us pushing and making requests for more and better.
Perfect. One final question, and while you're doing that, I'm just going to share my screen with the contact information for me. But the last question is, how do you breach these topics with your manager, especially if they're trending more towards micromanagement and doing more with less time during COVID? How do we ask for more time to learn?
Yeah, it's really sensitive, right? I think one of the things that you can do is you can refer them to our website. I have a video on the importance of learning in a crisis. I have a video about why L&D is important in terms of managers, and just sharing that with them. But you can watch that video on your own and just in conversation to try and provide reasoning for why this is so important. Be sympathetic, right? This is a really difficult time, and they are probably getting pressure to try and do a lot of things at once. But as I say, this idea of more with less, we've got to stop that. It's just that's a trite and really tired expression. And what we really need to do is we need to come together. And you cannot, if you really have to if you keep hearing that expression, the way that you could possibly innovate That's what they're trying to say, doing right when they say more with less, is you have to learn, you have to explore, you have to have the fuel that provides innovation and that exploratory learning. So if they say, no, we don't have time for it, we have to innovate, we have to figure out new solutions. Well, in order to find solutions, you have to learn. Like, there's no way around that. And so that's what the argument would be, is if you want us to find solutions and do something better, then that's exactly why we need to do more learning and development programming.
And when you are coming in with your ask, with my leadership presence background, you want to be persuasive. I would say, if you're excited about what you want the manager to say yes to, share enthusiasm, be enthusiastic, because that's contagious. Don't hold back with that. Try to ask with something that starts smaller, make it harder for them to say no. And then for the opportunities that you do get, follow up. Let them know what the benefit was, not just to you, but to them, to the company, to the bottom line. And then hopefully you can do bigger asks and get more yeses and more momentum in the future.
Yeah, that's great advice. And it's true. Like, once that you have the momentum moving forward, it's really going to help, people see we're already moving in this direction. Whatever you do, don't be punitive about it. Don't sort of shake your finger at them saying, you should really be doing more, learning for us. Be sympathetic and just, say, do you mind if we have this guest come in for an all staff, and see how rewarding that is for people. So you at least get that ball rolling in the culture.
Awesome. Thank you, Amira, and thank you, Emil. We can go ahead, and I just wanted to say thank you to everybody for attending and for the great conversation. We are going to be having those next 2 webinars in the series upcoming within the next 2 weeks. You can learn more about those and register at professionaled.utexas.edu.
All right. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.